Welcome back, builders and riders. Today's video is going to be a Q&A to answer motorized bike questions that I've gotten in the comments over the past few weeks and I need to catch up on. Quick announcement for my returning viewers who wonder where I've been over the past month. Don't worry, nothing bad happened. I just got a little burnt out and had to step back and take a break. Turns out, trying to post videos weekly, answer bike questions in the comments, emails, direct message, and manage a Discord server with a full-time job is just a lot easier to do when the channel is small, but is becoming more difficult as time goes on. So for the foreseeable future, I'm probably just going to focus on keeping the same weekly and bi-weekly bike video schedule, but I probably won't be as active in the community when it comes to replying to comments in the Discord server. Maybe someday if I do this full time, but for now, I hope you guys can understand. Taking an internet break from posting doesn't mean I've been taking a break from the bikes completely. Admittedly, I haven't been riding as much, mostly because the weather's been kind of crap on my days off, but I squeeze in what I can when I can. Still plenty of bikes I've been pushing miles on so we can get future videos with, and in the background of today's video you're going to see us riding one of the Cranbrooks with the Motoos motor, and this has the pull start with the expanded crankset. Used to have a belt drive on it, but we went back to the chain drive. As many of you remember, the belt drive didn't exactly work out too well. And I've also been pushing as many miles as I can on the 52-volt Magicycle Cruiser Pro. This has the dual battery setup. I plan to take this on a long-range camping trip, but it turns out it can easily push over 100 miles with these two batteries, and I'm not exactly sure where to take it. So in the meantime, I've just been making it as comfortable as possible. Out of the box, the bike's pretty comfortable, but 100 miles is, well, it's 100 miles. So I put a nice cushy seat on it from Zacro, a Zoom suspension seat post, and a handlebar riser on the stem. More on that in the future, but anyways, let's get on to the Q&A. Why do you remove the stock mainspring when installing the DLH superclutch or other similar systems? Well, the short answer is that it uses 3 external springs and the internal spring is no longer required. The long answer to this, and what you probably really want to know is what's the benefit, requires understanding the motor. These 2-stroke motorized bike engines are designed to be as compact as possible so they'll fit inside as many frames as possible, which is why they're single speeds and they don't have a pull start. This is also why you have an internal clutch system that's very compact. It's an imperfect system with a lot of limitations. Now, putting performance aside and also considering that the DLH system, for better or worse, has its own set of dynamics, there's a lot of benefits to having the mainsprings external, and here's why. To service the stock clutch system can often require splitting the case, punching out bearings, removing sprockets, and bevel gears, all of which you would have to do if you installed the new system, but only once. On the stock system, you might have to do it multiple times depending on whatever issues you run into. The DLH system removes all of that. You no longer have to split the case, remove bearings or sprockets to service the clutch system, and it can often be done in a few moments with minimal tools, whether it's complete disassembly, fine-tune adjustments, or basic maintenance. All of this simply because you are able to move the mainsprings to the outside of the case. And if you're able to do so, then, in my opinion, it's definitely worth it. If for nothing else, it's easier to work on. Then of course there's the performance benefits, at least on paper, of having the 3 mainsprings spaced on the outside of the plate to give more even pressure. Whether or not that makes a big difference, I don't know, but I just love the ease of maintenance. And the fact that he offers this same design in a budget system for, I think, less than $50 is a big bonus for long-term use. What's the setup on my trail bike and how does it get so much power? He claims he gets 30 to 35 miles an hour with his kit and a lot of 4-stroking. Well, the bike in question is a trail bike with a big port kit. It's got a 49mm top end. It does have a light port job on it to give it some more low-end grunt as well, because it's designed to be a trail bike. It's not actually that fast, however. I think it might top out about the same as yours if I pinned it to the wall when this bike was in service. A stock motor getting 30 miles an hour is actually fine in my opinion, and that's what's to be expected. 35 is actually great. Remember, you're on a bicycle, so don't try and push those limits too high. Now, if you're having a lot of 4-stroking, well, this depends. If it's 4-stroking when you hit full throttle and you're under load, climbing a hill, or accelerating, then yes, you should probably try to tune that out by making the mix a little leaner. Less fuel, more air. However, if it's 4-stroking when you're under light load, you're just cruising, maybe flat ground, just not a lot of load on the motor, this can be completely normal. Yes, you can precisely tune the carburetor to get rid of it, or at the very least, reduce it for the most part. However, it's pretty normal in my opinion for these motors to 4-stroke when they don't have a lot of load on them. So if that's your situation, then don't try to chase your tail around trying to get rid of every last bit of 4-stroking, as it's usually always going to be there with the stock carburetor. Have I tested the hydraulic clutch system with the DLH super clutch? Not yet. I do have both and plan on testing them. I'll try to get on that here pretty soon. The main issue is that it's on a motor already, and to get that hydraulic clutch system, you have to purchase an entire motor. At least that's how it was the last time I checked. I don't think anybody sells the hydraulic system separately, which is really unfortunate because I really like the hydraulic system. It's super smooth and comfortable to operate. Now, in theory, combining it with the super clutch would make things better. There's some limitations with the DLH system combining it with stock hardware. Here's what I've noticed. The clutch cams don't last very long. They tend to round out pretty quickly because they just can't handle that much pressure from the DLH system. The mandrels can be a bit of an issue too, but not as big as the clutch cam. And this constant rounding out means it loses adjustment and the clutch system drags. It becomes hard to idle the bike, so on and so forth. Also, when the DLH system is brand new, you have to make a lot of adjustments for the first couple of rides. We have this all in our first impressions and review video. However, the performance and ease of maintenance makes it worth it in my opinion, so I don't deal too much with worrying about that. The hydraulic system in theory would eliminate pretty much all that. It's a self-adjusting system, so that takes care of that. It also has a lot of leeway when it comes to adjustment, so it should last quite a long time without having to dig into the system and make all the fine adjustments. And being easier to operate means that your hand doesn't get as fatigued as fast because it's just easier to pull the clutch lever. One thing that I would watch out for, though, is between the bucking bar and the hydraulic piston, I would recommend putting a wear disc inside the piston. There's a lot of pressure from the DLH system that would be pushing against the bucking bar and, in turn, the piston for the hydraulic system. And that piston, as far as I can tell, is aluminum, so it would be eaten through relatively easily. So you'll want a lot of grease and a disc in between them to take up the wear, something that you can replace, because if you damage the piston, good luck finding another one, considering the fact that you'd have to purchase a motor just to get the hydraulic system itself. Do you need a windowed piston to run a reed valve? And the short answer is no, and I would even recommend trying it and just see how your motor performs. The long answer gets way more complicated. Here we go. Not to crush anyone's hopes and dreams, but if you're looking for an easy bolt-on solution with minimal work that will give you a performance gain, you won't notice it with a reed valve, at least not on these stock motors. Their intake piston port design does not mesh well with a reed valve, whether or not you have a windowed piston. At best, with the stock port duration, I noticed a smoother running engine with better fuel economy, but performance actually took a slight dive. The only time I noticed a performance increase, which was actually noticeable, was when I added a third transfer port, basically along the backside of the engine, a nice little trench that helps get more fuel and air into the combustion chamber during the compression stroke. And in this case, it was actually really nice to have. But that requires porting, and that gets a little more complicated and is beyond the scope of this video. Also, keep in mind the moment you bolt on a reed valve, you need to be prepared to retune your carburetor, whether or not you have a windowed piston. This is simply because it messes with the entire intake dynamics. You have less of a return pulse going back out, and that actually does pull more fuel out of the jet of the carburetor, and because it gets sucked back in, well, most of it, not all of it, this messes with your entire tune. So you're going to be retuning your carburetor, possibly even replacing it altogether. And that is just to get back the performance you lost by bolting it on in the first place. Getting improvements, like I said, is going to require port work. Now, if you're converting to a case reed, totally different situation, and I don't have experience with it, so I can't say anything about it. In a nutshell, for daily drivers, not performance bikes, I would say the only justification for a reed valve is better fuel economy. Where did I get the exhaust system on the Swin Taft? This is a WC80 pipe from California Motorbikes. Bikeberry has one as well. They call it the Bikeberry Deluxe, and as far as I can tell, they're the exact same pipe. These give decent top-end performance, and I would say they're the next best thing to getting a real MZ65, but nowhere near the performance you get from a real MZ65. Does the bike move without pedaling? Well, you can look at this and get your answer, but I'm pretty sure there's more to it than this. Yes, all the gas and electric bikes I have will move purely off motor power. Electrics will do so from a dead stop. Gas gets a little more complicated. Most stock motors, you have to pedal them to start the motor, and you'll want to pedal from a dead stop to help the motor get up to speed because they're single speeds. They're not really geared to go from a dead stop. You can technically feather the clutch and play with the throttle to get going from a dead stop if you really don't want to pedal, but this can play hell on the clutch pads and wear them out pretty quick if you do it all the time. High-end performance motors like the Chainsaw Hybrid builds, Minarellis, Phantom 85s, they can usually get away without pedaling at all from a dead stop if you're on level ground or a slight incline, but for the most part it's practical to pedal until you get up to about 5 miles an hour on the gas bikes. Have I ever run into any issues with the police when it comes to motorized bike stuff? No, I've been pretty lucky when it comes to this. Both gas or electric's never given me any problems. As a nice little benefit of all the electric bikes that have been running around in even my small town these days is it makes the gas bikes less noticeable, especially because of how I ride and where I ride. When it comes to the gas bikes, I try to be as least annoying as possible, stay out of people's way. I've always got a helmet on. If it's low light, I've always got lights. I'm never blazing through neighborhoods full throttle or any stupid stuff like that. If you annoy your neighbors, you get the cops called on you, then that becomes a problem that will never go away. So you just try to stop it before it becomes an issue. Plus, I ride a lot of back roads, trails, side streets, areas where people just generally don't care. Here I'm starting to get into some older comments where individuals have likely already gotten their answer, but this information is still going to be relevant for many of you. And in this situation, I unfortunately do not have a good option for you if you're determined to go with a gas bike. When it comes to these two-stroke motorized bike kits, I could make some recommendations for motors that I like, but it's such a lottery that I have no way of telling you whether or not you're going to get a limit. If you absolutely have to go with a gas bike making 50-mile round trips 5 days a week, I would recommend going with a Firestorm Zeta 80, a Wildcat PK80, or if you need more power, then the Firestorm Zeta 100. They're just the most reputable and easy to obtain motors that I can think of. That doesn't necessarily mean they're going to be the best, but at least the customer support's there somewhat. Anyways, I've had good experience with the Firestorm Zeta 80s. Great motors, been pretty tanks for what I've put them through. However, even I don't ride that much on a gas bike a month, what you're going to put into it a week. Here's my recommendation. Build a bike anyways and try it. Just get something like a Huffy Lachlan, Kent Bayside, something without a coaster brake, okay? Those are good frames, easy to mount motors to, beginner friendly. Get yourself a Firestorm Zeta 80 or Wildcat PK80 or the Zeta 100 if you need the extra power, which probably you won't unless you're carrying a lot of cargo. And that brings even more issues when it comes to the bike's integrity. Anyways, just build the bike anyways and try it. Because I have this philosophy about gas-powered motorized bikes is you build them for fun, and if they happen to be reliable, then that's great. You might build it and it might work out and you can take it on these long rides every week. You're still gonna have issues. You're gonna run into problems. Chains are gonna break, spark plugs are gonna fail, your ignition system might crap out randomly, fuel problems, carburetors clogging up. The rear wheel is going to give you a lot of issues. These are all just things that happens to everybody on their first build or two. But if you're mechanically inclined, you can deal with them and know how to prevent them from happening in the future, and it might just work out. So, I mean, build the bike anyways, even if you can't use it for your main mode of transportation, and just see how it goes. Now, if you have money to spend, the electric bikes are going to give you a lot less problems. And considering you say this is a 50-mile round trip, I'm assuming 25 miles, you go to work, you spend a few hours there, recharge your battery, and then 25 miles to come home. Every electric bike I've tested so far will do 25 miles. If you have it between a 15 and 20 amp hour battery, you can expect to do that trip at about 20 miles an hour and still have juice when you get there. Of course, doing that 5 days a week, all year, I would expect about 2 years on a battery before you need to replace it because of degradation. What's the difference and benefits of going with a G4 style cylinder? Well, most of the major suppliers sell motors all with G4 cylinders these days, so it's not a big deal. There's the G5s as well, which are iron sleeves. They can be a bit of a mess, but if you know what you're doing, you can clean them up and get some benefits out of them for longevity, at least. I don't know about performance. But the G4 cylinders, compared to the old original cylinders, have open transfer ports, and they give you more performance out of the box. That's pretty much it. They are also a little easier to do port work on because you have more room to work with. But from what I understand is the original jugs, if you got a good one where the lining doesn't peel off over time, they actually last longer than the G4s because they support the cylinder a little bit more. There's more material on the inside of the jug to keep it from bouncing around. These are so cheap and easy to replace that I find the performance benefits of the newer G4s to outweigh the longevity of the older jugs. That's my take on it anyways. There's probably more to it than that. Confusion and lack of understanding as to why the orientation and design of the cooling fins on the Phantom 85 is the way it is. And you and me are kind of asking ourselves the same question. I have no idea why they did this. The motor runs hot, among many other issues, which they've tried to fix. So here's the thing. On hybrid motors where people adapt chainsaw jugs to a motorized bike bottom end, it's fine because they're just working with what they have. Like, they know there's going to be cooling issues. It's going to run hot, okay? That cylinder was designed for forced air cooling. They're being passively cooled on a bicycle. Okay, we've been over this before, right? But the Phantom 85 doesn't make any sense because it's a custom mold. They made a mold to adapt that jug design to a motorized bike kit. And when they were making the mold, and it's very clear that they did because it has wings to cover the transfer ports, it matches all the bolt patterns on the intake, exhaust, and bottom end. Okay, it's very clear they made this mold for the bike. They decided to keep the forced air cooling design on the fins. This has to come out of pure laziness and lack of understanding of what this motor was going to be used for. Okay, so if they were to make the cooling fins bigger in the mold, it might cost them a few pennies, which they could add to the price of the motor. Okay, I would pay a little bit more for better cooling. So it doesn't make sense that this would be a cost-cutting issue, as they could just transfer it to the end user. This just has to be laziness. What's worse about this is they recently redesigned the Phantom 85 jug so that it doesn't have the ring snagging issues on the intake port. Okay, I believe Motored Life, heck, he has one of the new ones, and he showed us that the intake port is smaller, so it shouldn't snag rings anymore. And I think they also switched out pistons to make it less likely for them to break. When redesigning the new cylinder for the Phantom 85, they kept the same cooling fins. Why did they do this? This is so dumb. They know it runs hot. They know it's going to have overheating issues. Well, you and me both, buddy. I have no idea. I do know who designed the port map for the jug, schematics, and adapted it. And he has told me directly that they did not follow his specifications. So it's not even blaming the designer of the jug. There's some middleman issues going on here. Realistic expectations of what it would cost to build your first bike out the door, everything. The bike, the motor kit, any specialty tools, which really the only specialty tool you need for your first build is a chain breaker, a 415 chain breaker. Based off of my own experience with my first build, which I consider to have gotten lucky on, is it didn't give me a lot of problems other than just an endless amount of flat tires, I would say $300. You can budget $300 if you're mechanically inclined and expect to have a running bike with a little bit of wiggle room. I'd say worst case scenario, you have a lot of issues, a lot of things break to chain brakes, you're replacing flat tires nonstop, the motor gives you little issues and you have to buy new parts. Expect $500 to be a safe maximum on your first build and a minimum of $300. This is just an estimation. Yeah, I know there's some of you like, I got a free bike out of the trash and I bought a motor off eBay for $20 and it works great. Cool, lucky you. Not everybody's going to get that lucky, and this is a realistic number which I feel is safe. That would be a no because I've never sold a bike on eBay. Occasionally I'll put something up on Facebook Marketplace because it's got to be local pickup. I'm not dealing with shipping bikes. But I really don't sell my bikes. I mostly just build them and then put them under a tarp and then pick one and ride it randomly for a video. I have played around with the idea of building a gas electric, but it would just be for fun and to see how it turns out. But when I think about it in a practical sense, when it comes to bicycles and how many problems we already have to deal with on these cheap things, it's really just asking for trouble. The bike's going to be really heavy. It's going to have a lot of complications when it comes to wiring, setting all the systems to work together. And then, when one system breaks, and let's be real, the gas system is going to break at some point, whether it's something small or catastrophic, then you have a half-working bike, which doesn't really make sense to ride. Yeah, you have the electric system when the gas fails or vice versa, but it's just made it more inefficient to ride. So you have a bike that works half the time when something breaks, and then there's more to it than that. So in a nutshell, I'm probably never going to build one. If you want to, great, have fun, good luck. How fast? Too fast, or fast enough, whichever one you want to go with. When it comes to building a motorized trail bike or mountain bike, you're all going to have to do your own research. I've played around with a handful of different mountain bike style frames, and at some point I found one I really liked. It was the Rally Tullus 1, and then I could never find it again. It's really hard to make recommendations when it comes to trail bikes because they're so inconsistent, and of course you could buy a really nice high-end expensive hardtail then try to justify putting a gas motor on it, which is why when people ask me what frames I recommend, I usually just recommend the Huffy Lachlan, because in my opinion that is the best frame to put a motor on when it comes to simple and new builder friendly. And beyond that, you just got to do your own research, because trying to find a suitable trail bike that doesn't require a lot of hoops to jump through to get it to work with is tricky, and that's just my experience. I got the Swin Taff and I made it work, but that is by no means a new builder friendly bike. Had to weld the sprocket on, the motor fitment was incredibly tight. I don't know how I got the gas tank on with the exhaust system. I don't even remember, it was so complicated. It required bending adapter plates. It was, it works and I love that bike, but making it a recommendation for something like that, not going to do it. Huffy Lachlan, Kent Bayside. Down tube's kind of fat, but universal adapter plate works. And then of course there's the Huffy Cranbrook. Everybody knows that, but it's got a coaster brake and that's got its own issues which you got to deal with. So that's about all the energy I got for this week's video. I hope you guys got some useful information or were mildly entertained. And until next time, ride safe.